Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all for your patience.
Okay. I need to turn on my mic.
My apologies.
Right there? There we go. Okay.
Great.
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, wonderful.
Great.
Thank you again for joining us
No,
and
thank
for
you.
being here today.
Thank you.
And real opportunity here to follow up on the conversations that have been had and to learn from your expertise from the top from USAID.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're talking about partnerships today and how vital they are for expertise, leveraging resources, scaling impact.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious from your perspective and also from USAID's, how are you prioritizing partnerships, understanding the need for development is great around the world. There are a number of complexities that are incredibly challenging, as we've discussed. How do you start to think about that, and how do you prioritize in your strategic planning?
Thank you for the question, Allison, and again, happy to be here. Let me start with a story. So I recently was the USAID mission director in Uganda, and last year about this time, we were dealing with the challenge of the Anti-Homosexuality Act that was passed. And as you can imagine, it was quite disruptive. It unleashed a lot of kind of vigilante violence against individuals from that community. And it was quite disturbing. We very, very quickly pulled together some funding, and with some innovative procurement, we engaged a local organization, a civil society organization, that had a network across the country of people in the community to be able to very, very quickly, within a matter of weeks, start providing emergency support, medical support, food support, shelter, all of those kinds of things. And within about 9 months, we had supported, and in many cases, I think saved people, about 1,000 people by our best count. And what was unique about that partnership was that it was a local organization that had feelers in the community, and they were able to actually know who to go to, who to talk to, and what was actually needed. And we co-created this. We didn't tell them what to do. We approached them, we sat down with them, and designed it together. And so, we had our expertise, they brought theirs, and that co-creation was able to be extremely successful and critical at that point in time. So that really is emblematic, I think, of what USAID is thinking about now, is trying to look at this new phase, this phase of getting out of the silo that USAID can often be in, being the biggest development agency on the planet, to think we need others. We can't do it alone. And so we have a new policy framework. We talk about progress beyond programs, and we're emphasizing new ways to work with partners at every level. That's really been important. Power Africa, since I am the coordinator for Power Africa, I'll be talking about that a lot, is really kind of the quintessential example of progress beyond programs, of a way to leverage some support, some financing, to be able to bring in and catalyze a lot of investment supporting the private sector to advance energy access on the continent.
Thank you for that example and that story. It's a powerful one, and it, I think, goes against what may be some thinking that because USAID is among the largest agencies in the world investing in development around the world, that it would be difficult to move, unresponsive, or not able to be as agile. And so, in that Uganda example, how long have you been developing those relationships? What enabled you then to be that responsive in the moment, to be able to have the impact that you had?
No, it's a great question. There were a couple of different components that came together. Number one is, through a lot of our health work over the years with PEPFAR and other work, we knew a lot of these civil society organizations. And so we already had some idea of what their capabilities were, what their reach was, what their priorities were. We still had to do due diligence and figure out if they were able to manage the amount of funding we wanted to provide the types of interventions that we needed them to provide, that they wanted to provide. But that experience together already had established a level of trust that enabled us to move quickly. The other piece of it was that one of our local staff, about 6 months earlier, had actually put in a request back to Washington for some special funding for this kind of thing, just almost prescient. And so we had funding ready to go. So, because that often is the thing that takes so long, is being able to get the funding, and then it's the programming of it, right? And those two pieces were able to come together very quickly with sort of a novel approach to be able to co-create this, and we got it done in a matter of weeks, which was really amazing.
And really speaks to the communication at different levels of the organization, and to enable that responsiveness.
Right, exactly.
And you talk about progress, and I'm curious, when you have over 200 partners in Power Africa, and what was it, 128 billion, over 128 billion in investment. I'm curious how you measure that progress. What are the metrics that you use, and how can you ensure that those investments are driving the intended impact, and when they're not, that you're able to adjust?
Yeah. Power Africa is a little bit of it's a unique model in that we have two overarching goals of 30 gigawatts of new generation and 60 million connections by the year 2030 on the continent. And remember, we are a U.S. government initiative with 12 U.S. government partners, all contributing resources to this effort. We have 22 development partners, other donors who are contributing to this as well, multilateral and bilateral. And then we have over 200 private sector partners that we're working with. So we're always measuring the impact against those two goals. And in some ways, it's like PEPFAR, where you've got the 90-90-90 goals that really drive everything. And what's unique about those North Stars is that there is no way that USAID alone is going to reach the two Power Africa goals. There's no way that USAID alone, or even USAID and CDC alone, are going to reach the PEPFAR goals. They're set at a level that really requires us to partnership. So there's that incentive built in that really requires us to reach out, to engage other partners, and align all of our efforts. And that's the beauty of the Power Africa model. So that's one way that we track our success. Another way is with us, because we're working with the private sector so much, trying to get them to be successful, that we can track to see if they're profitable, right? Private sector is all about profit. Even if they have a social element to it, it's ultimately about profit. If you're talking about for-profit business, which is who we interact with a lot. I was just in the DRC a couple of weeks ago, and I met this company. It's a Congolese company founded by this Congolese entrepreneur about 8 years ago, and they do solar home systems. They start with very small systems, a single component, and they go up to large systems that include a TV and small appliances and multiple panels. And he has developed this model, and this is a notoriously difficult place to be profitable in Africa, because your customers have very, very little paying capacity. He has figured out how to make this work. He has 500,000 customers now, and 60% of them actually move from one band to the next band. And he does it on credit, and he has a 99% repayment rate. And so it's really a model that we're trying to dig into more. And just to give you an example, he's figured out they'll require an upfront deposit of $5 US dollar equivalent. and then every day it's $1. And they literally have somebody that goes around and collects the $1 and then gives them a code so they can use it for that day. So, and it works. And they have this 99% payment rate because they know who their customers are, and they make it grow. And so he's looking at all sorts of expansion plans, and it's just a really unique model. And that to us is a successful partnership.
Absolutely, and underscores the importance of know your customer, right? And I think it's a great example too of innovation and innovative approaches to partnerships. And so when you think about, we're talking about lessons learned and ways to refine the way you operate and the ways of doing business. And so if you can speak to some different ways that USAID is innovating as far as the types of partnerships, the way you're working with different organizations around the world, especially in complex environments.
Yeah, I'll give you one example. USAID recently set up an alliance called the Circle Alliance. It's with Ernst & Young and Unilever, utilizing USAID's EDGE fund, which is a fund to engage the private sector. And it's set up to be very quickly available, responsive, to be able to coordinate effectively with the private sector. And this project is all about reducing the need for plastics, reducing the need for, or the production of plastic waste. And so it's creating sort of a circular approach to utilizing plastic. So USAID is bringing the EDGE fund, it's bringing expertise in terms of working with women's groups who are utilizing plastic in their businesses. Unilever obviously understands supply chains, plastic supply chains. They're bringing that. E&Y is providing business expertise in terms of how to run an effective business. And that combination of partnerships, all interested in the same outcome, are what's helping that to be successful.
So we just have a few minutes left, and I'm curious, looking ahead and thinking about your planning, your investment, and again, the dynamics of the world we live in, growing demographics, climate change, increasing fragmentation, as we talked about earlier. What, from your perspective and USAID's priorities, warrants the most attention? Where do you need to focus now in light of the world that we work in and the types of partnerships you need to forge in light of those challenges?
I mean, that's a really tough question because the needs are so great and so broad, right? I mean, we know that the private sector is the one with the most financing resources, right? 90% of all investment that's going into countries around the world is private. It's not public. That's changed over the last 50 years, right? Dramatically, we all know that. So my own view is that we need to be focusing on those development areas where we can catalyze that and dip into that 90%, right? Where we can actually find ways to work with the private sector. And one of the issues is, with USAID, like I have a private sector background. I was in the private sector for years and years before joining USAID. And so I'm not afraid of the private sector. I know what motivates them. I can have those conversations. Many of my colleagues have not had that experience. And the private sector is this space that they're just unfamiliar with. And so USAID is actually going to great lengths to try and improve that, to make sure we have people within our staffing system who have that kind of experience or are getting training in that area to be able to build that out. We've set up a new system, a Compass system, relationship management system that finally gets us to where companies were about 20 years ago in terms of managing their relationships. But it's a step forward. And so all of these things are important for us to be able to have that more dynamic and effective relationship with the private sector, which again, the development partners are another area where we need to be focusing on, and there's an effort there as well. But I think if we really want to be successful, we have to be able to find these opportunities to work with companies, both large and also local.
You make such an incredible point about establishing bridges, using similar language, breaking down the silos to really enable those partnerships, and going back to something that we were talking about earlier, make them last over time. Thank you for your work, your impact, and for your collaboration with us today.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.